Over the last few months, I've spent countless hours perfecting the fit of this body, getting the stance of the car absolutely perfect before finishing it all off with, in my eyes, are the perfect set of wheels and tyres to take this build to what I hope is going to be another level. And in this episode, I'm finally in a position to start the body support structure, which is going to start marrying the 300SL Gullwing body to the Mercedes SLK chassis. I make some massive inroads to this, so let's crack on. After cutting off the sill panel, I want to make this area of the body the first part that I address. I'm not going to break out the tube bender and start bending up main roll cage hoops yet, because I need to build some confidence and get my own buy-in on the fact that the way I'm going about this is correct, because it's not a way that anyone else has done it from what I've seen. So I'm going to be making this one up, not as I go along, because I'm putting in so much thought before I do put any work to hand. So with that in mind, the first thing I'm going to do is cut a nice piece of 1x1 box that is going to run the full length of the new return flange. I'm then going to cut some more 1x1 box that is going to tie that new run back to the SLK chassis and get that tack welded in place. So what that will do is basically fix the body front to back and side to side. So it's critically important that I do get the body absolutely spot on where I want it, and I must admit I have spent a couple of hours doing just that. So I'm pleased with the relationship of absolutely everything, so now it's time to start fixing it into place. So I measured up for the length of box section, adding a little bit extra just in case for some wiggle room before getting the chop saw out. I added a chamfer to the front edge of this piece of box, and that'll all make sense a little bit further on down the road. Once that was all cut to length, I then spent a good amount of time getting it level and in the correct position along the sill flange before clamping it into place and then drilling through there a number of holes, holding it into position with some Cleco pins. What you can see here is the fact that I've just glued some tabs to the outside face of the body on both sides of the car. This isn't so I can rest the doors into position or anything like that. It's so I can take some overall width dimensions from the outer points of the side of the car. Because on the drawings that I've found online, you can actually pull off some dimensions where you need to set the width of your body, so you can pull or push in your fiberglass body to suit those dimensions. So for me, the dimension that I found and the dimension that I have confidence in is is 1,730 millimeters from outer sill to outer sill. Now, me being me and looking at how the body sits in relation to the wheels, both front and rear, I'm actually going to narrow that down slightly, and I'll tell you why, and it will make sense. How the body hangs, I want to have the rear tyre slightly more visible when you're looking at a front quarter view of the car. I'll show you on the front what I mean, but what I'm going to do is actually pull in this body by 10 or 15 millimeters just on this lower portion. It doesn't affect this top edge hardly any at all. But what that does give me is this little sort of pie slice of tyre that you can then see from that front quarter view, which will match exactly with the pie slice of the front tyre that you can see on the rear quarter view. The rear body quite heavily cloaks the rear wheels, and because I want to accentuate the dish on the wheels, I want to have this detail so it will really sort of show the fitment of these wheels exactly how I want. So I took ages deciding that this is what I wanted to do, pulled around with all sorts of different dimensions and gaps until I arrived at something that I was happy with. So now I can measure up for the width of those brackets that are going to weld to the 1x1 along the flank of the body and just start getting everything tied together. So I did take quite a lot of time getting millimetre accuracy for the lengths of these outrigger pieces. I did chop all four at the same time just to make sure that they were identical to each other. Pair for the rear, pair for the front, before getting them back over to the car. Here you can see I've got the seal bar and the connecting piece mocked up into position, everything cleaned up, ready for welding. So just at the moment, I've got one at the back here, and then spinning round, I've got one just down at the front there. There will be more cross members that will get welded in, but just as a starter for 10, just one at the front, one at the back, that will start getting this body fixed into position. So what I can now do is get the welder out and just put some tacks on these just in the meantime, while I then work on the rest of the bracing inside the seal. As with anything that you're fabricating, it's such a time-consuming process, and it really feels like that when you do get to that final welding stage, even just tacking it into place, it feels like it's a huge milestone and you really are starting to make massive steps in the right direction. So it was really great just to see everything slowly start to come together as I'd pictured and just start to work out as I'd hoped. With the bottom body brace now tacked into place, the next thing I want to turn my attention to is this upper door bar. Now, I've not seen anyone else do this, but for me, this was something that I really wanted to work into this body support structure, because I want to really sort of belt and braces this whole approach to tying the body to the chassis. And by adding these two parallel bars from the bottom of the body and at the top of the door, it's just yet further reinforcement to the body and yet more points where it will tie the two together. So what I've done is spent a ridiculous amount of time getting this bar set into place where I want it. And if you remember, the inner seal panel will then sit in and actually sit on this brace. What I will do, and I'll cover off whether it's this video or the next video, the actual inner brace, so which sits on the inside of the car, which will support that whole seal panel. But for the moment, we're just focusing on this outer portion of the door bars. So I've got both of these bars absolutely parallel, so I can chop down 3 bars to suit the distance and then get those tacked into place or get them offered into place. And then I can start looking at these diagonal braces and the support that's necessary for those. And we just start going from there, really. Once you've got a plan of attack in place, it's easiest to cut all of the sections that you need for both sides. The 3 that I cut for the side that I'm working on at the moment, I also cut the additional 3 for that second side. And it just means you have a stockpile of parts ready to go. The second side comes together so much quicker. So I've got the vertical bars cut and I've got the rear one just held into place with some welding magnets, because what I now want to move on to is creating the diagonal brace that runs from the inner wheel arch, so from back here through to the horizontal bar. So what I've made myself is it's a reinforcement plate really, and that is going to weld to the seam of the inner and outer arches. So there's basically 4 layers of metal here, which is, it's a good 5 or 6 millimeters thick. So I've got this reinforcement plate, which is going to mount here, and then it allow me to weld in my diagonal brace to some nice solid flat plate here. So this is 3 millimeters or so thick. So what I need to do, get this held into place, get the diagonal brace marked up, and then cut from some box section. I really enjoyed coming up with the design solution of adding these diagonal brace bars. For me, it's just something a little extra rather than just doing a typical 90 butt joint. It's something very simple, but hey, it keeps me happy and it keeps the enthusiasm going and just makes me want to crack on. I've got my base plate held in place, and here you can see I've now got my newly cut diagonal support Now, just with the level finder, yeah, I'll be able to get that absolutely bang on level for welding in. So what this now finally allows me to do is cut this top bar to length. I'm going to put a chamfer cut in that because I want that detail to be incorporated into this piece. And then I can get these tack welded together. So I've got the top brace now held back into position with the chamfer cut on that back edge. So now when I offer in the diagonal bar, you can see that the line of the bar, if I can get it right in the right place, you can see there's the line of the diagonal that then runs through with the horizontal door bar. The end will be capped, but it's just a detail that I wanted to incorporate that will never ever be seen. So what I can now do, get everything cleaned up and get it tack welded into place. Oh, I need to do the same thing for the front of the top bar. So I'll cut another angle piece that you can see here, and that will then connect through to the A pillar. So I'll crack on with that, get some welding done, and bish bash bosh. To say I double, triple, or even quadruple checked everything before taking a welding torch anywhere near these pieces was a massive understatement. I spent ages just making sure it was all correct and true and set out as best as I could possibly get it before putting any tacks down on these pieces. It's a real great thing about showing you guys this journey, you know, it makes me want to push to do any of this fabrication work to the best of my ability and to try and end up with something that I am truly proud of at the end of the day. So from an initial idea, I'm really happy with how this one has actually turned out. The top and bottom bars are beautifully parallel. I've got the 3 vertical braces tacked into place along with the diagonal bars that tie the braces to the chassis. So this is really starting to provide a good physical tie between the body and the chassis, even without any bonding, you know, just held into place with Cleco pins. So I'm not going to take this any further than it is at the moment. When the body does come off, I will then do the final weld around all of the seams. I'm going to spray some cavity wax into all of the members so that prevents any rusting from the inside out. And the actual exterior of all of this framework, I'm probably going to prime and then spray in some 2K black just to give it some real good longevity and belt and braces this thing, and just do it as it should be. Later on, I'm going to be adding the internal bars that I spoke about previously, but before that happens, I do need to start fabricating the main roll cage hoops. That's going to come a little bit later. The next thing I want to turn my attention to is actually the boot space and the fuel tank. So let's crack on with that one. So I've spent a decent amount of time tidying up the back half of the car because this was left basically in a fairly rough state from when I was cutting off the bodywork and sort of paring back the chassis to get the bodywork sat over the actual chassis itself. So I've spent a good couple of hours just trimming everything back, getting it all smartened up and rationalised in preparation for the next stage. And what I want to do is start to put in the horizontal bar. So if I get the finger in, the horizontal bar that runs around the back of the bodywork, so the rear hoop to support the back of the body. And my plan for this is, so if we drop down here and try and show you what's going on. So here you can see the inner arch, and what I've done is cut it back to a certain point where you can see this piece of box section, this piece of existing reinforcement on the lower section of the inner arch. I'm going to put a new piece of 1x1 box, and if I can show you, so I'm going to go from there all the way out to the side of the body. That's going to provide me with the horizontal support to then bend up and install the round bar tubing that I'm going to use all the way around the perimeter of the body. Now, I'm planning on doing that tubing in 2 pieces because I think it's going to be a bit much for me to sort of get my head around as a first go and do it in 1 piece. So obviously there will be a second piece put on that side. You can see where that will weld into position, and then it'll all tie itself together nicely. And yes, start making that rear structure that I need to make. So first off, let me get this box section cut, let me get it clamped into place, and then we can figure out how to start bending up this piece of tubing with some new tools. So I've got the horizontal bars cut and primed and held into place with some welding magnets. So I'm going to get a couple of tacks on these, so then I can really start to fine tune the perimeter tube that runs around the backside of the body. Certainly for me, I think this solution is working out very nicely. Let me spin you back round. For me, I work along that sort of theory of if it looks right, then it is right. And with the positions of these horizontal bars, it then allows me to run a perfectly level bar around the perimeter of the backside of the body. And with the floor that I'm planning to build with the fuel tank, which I'll get onto, I can see it all just starting to come together exactly how I would like it to. There's, you know, nothing crazy about this. Simplicity for me, I think, is the best way to go about this. I'm sure for those of you out there building your own Gullwing, you've gone about this completely different, and there's no right or wrong way with one of these. You know, we're all going to end up at the same end goal. So let me break the welder out, get some spot welds on, and then yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the perimeter bar finally fitted in position and get some welds on that as well. As with everything else, it's just a matter of being confident in the setting out and the dimensions that you're reading from side to side. So I spent a good amount of time just making sure the setting out of both of these horizontal bars was identical to each other just before putting on a couple of quick tacks. So one of the first new tools that I treated myself to when considering this project was this tube roller. And what this will allow me to do is basically form really nice gradual bends in long lengths of either round bar or box section if you pick up the right dies. I've started to have a play around with this already. I've got a couple of lengths cut to length to fit round the back of the car. So I've just tried to start to get to grips with how this thing works, how much pressure you need to really start forming that nice gradual shape in those lengths. So it's going to be very much a sort of trial and error. Bend a bit, go and test fit it, come back, bend a bit more, because it's far easier to creep up on that radius that you need than it would be to bend it too far and then try and correct the work that you have done. So yeah, time consuming, but it's going to be another one of those sort of strings to my bow that I think is going to add to the quality of this build. So let's start cracking on with that. So what I've got here is one of the rear hoop halves. I've cut this down to its final length in preparation for final sort of position on the back of the body. What I did start thinking about was, because this is in 2 halves, there will be a butt joint in between the 2 pieces. If I just grab an offcut and show you what I mean, you know, there would be a very simple butt joint in between the 2 pieces. I decided that I wanted to reinforce that somewhat. So what I did was grab just an offcut of the 1-inch box. I cut off a small length and then cut it down its length and then took out probably a 10mm slice. I then welded that back together, and what I have here is basically a slug that will then fit inside the 2 pieces. You can see here that I've drilled a couple of spot weld holes, one above and one below. So that will be welded together. And then if you imagine that this is the second half, I will then drill the same spot weld holes in this second piece, and that would then slide over. So it would be spot welded and then seam welded around that joint. So it just adds a little bit more sort of reinforcement to that detail, designing out a possible weak spot. This was so time consuming. Obviously for me it was a massive learning curve with the tube roller, and I've never done anything like this before, but it was just one of those jobs that seemed to take an absolute eternity. So to have everything clamped into place, everything reading beautifully level, was a fantastic thing to see. The fitment of the hoop is really nice and tight to the backside of the body, and that's basically what you need to strive for, as tight a fitment as absolutely possible. It's just going to make everything from here on in so much easier to fabricate. So with one last double check that everything was sat exactly as it needed to be, I then threw on a few tacks and a couple plug welds in some necessary spots just to finally get it held under its own weight. Here you can see how nicely it does actually fit with none of the clamps and everything out of the way. And the simplicity of this, which, you know, I've mentioned before, it just sort of sits right with me in terms of this being the best method for me personally. I do have a couple of clicos just in the back side of the bodywork, picking up the internal framework just to start getting everything set. Now obviously there will be more bars and bits and pieces going in as this evolves, but at the moment, let me spin you round, at the moment this bar is done and dusted for the time being, because the next thing I want to get onto, and the reason I'm working down at the back of the car, is because I have my bespoke fuel tank turned up. So I'm excited to get that unboxed and start offering it into position. One of the areas that isn't particularly discussed when building one of these Gullwings is what to do with the fuel tank. Now on the SLK, the fuel tank is sat in between the rear arches behind the driver and passenger seat. It's sat quite high, so if you keep the fuel tank in its original location, then you're not able to set the rear deck area, you know, the luggage area, as low as it is on the original cars. For some people that really isn't an issue, it's not something that bothers them in the slightest, but for me, I wanted to get that correct height rear luggage area so I could actually have, you know, the correct two-piece luggage set in the back there, so it all looks absolutely as it would do in the original cars. So that took me down the road of trying to find an alternative solution of what to do for a petrol tank. I could have looked at relocating the existing SLK tank. The more I thought about it and the more I thought what I wanted to achieve in this car, I decided that I actually wanted to go for a bespoke fuel tank, and that is what I've had made, and that is what you can see in this box by the side of me. What I did was get in touch with a company called JSH Fabrications here in the UK and asked if they'd be interested in fabricating up a bespoke fuel tank, because this is what these guys do day in, day out. And obviously they were more than up for the challenge. You can check out their website. I'll put the details below and also in the description, but they do absolutely phenomenal work. And after a chat with them, I came away with a real confidence that these guys would be able to deliver exactly what I was after. So I actually prepared a reasonably detailed and obviously dimensioned sketch drawing that I then sent through to them, which then allowed them to fabricate this aluminium fuel tank. I'm going to unpack it now so you can see all of the work that they have put into this, and I'm really excited to offer it into place and then just figure out the framework necessary to support it. And I'm hoping it is going to come together and it's going to be the perfect solution for anyone wanting to build a Gullwing replica. I really couldn't be happier with how this tank has turned out. It is everything that I wanted it and needed it to be. Just to dig into a few details, I sized this as 10 metric gallons, which is just over 45 litres in fuel capacity. So it is pretty much exactly the same as the original SLK fuel tank. I designed in this perimeter mounting flange because you'll see how that integrates into my installation for the back of the car when we get into that. On this side over here, I've got a fuel return, and also I've got the breather from the charcoal canister. So the existing hoses will be picked up by these two returns here. And what I wanted was a centrally mounted internal fill. So here you can see I've got this really lovely knurled petrol cap as a nice detail on the car. The tank itself is internally baffled, and also it has been fitted with a swirl pot as well. What you are looking at from this side is the side that faces towards the front of the car, if that makes sense. The barb fitting at the front here for the fuel pickup is the correct diameter to fit the existing fuel supply hose. So I'm really hoping that this is going to provide me with a very cool, very custom, nicely thought out design solution for this petrol tank. So if any of you guys out there are building a Gullwing on an SLK and you want to get that correct level rear cabin space and you need a new fuel tank, then get in touch with JSH Fabrications and they will be able to make you your very own. So I think what we need to do now is start offering it into position and start fabricating up some metalwork to support this thing. With anything bespoke made, it's a bit of a nerve-wracker the very first test fit, because I don't trust myself that I can use the tape measure properly, if I'm perfectly honest. But I'm really pleased to say that this is fitting in between the chassis rails exactly as I'd envisaged, as I'd designed. So what this will now allow me to do is get some box section cuts and start fabricating the framework in between the chassis rails, so the tank flanges have then got something really nice and robust to bolt down to. I'm going to drop the frame down the back side of the fuel tank, because then that is going to allow me to take some more horizontal bars out to the rear body hoop to further brace that up as well. But here you can see as it sits with that centrally located filler cap that I wanted, and at the bottom side of the front of the tank you can just see the pickup down there. That is going to run nice and tightly to the underside of the chassis, up and over the diff, and then down to the fuel pump, which is located down in the diff. This point feels like a really natural stage to wrap this episode. Before I start digging into cutting the new box section to support the tank, I basically want to save this whole back portion of the car until the next episode, get the tank supported, get all of the additional frame rails in place, before then starting to fabricate all of the new sheetwork for the actual boot and the sides, so I can fit out the whole back end of this car exactly as I want it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It certainly felt like I've got a massive amount achieved, and it feels like the next videos going forwards, there's going to be equal amounts of progress during those videos. So up until the next one, I'll catch you next time.